Hello everyone, thanks for watching another edition of the Audible Market. We usually talk about amazing food in the city, what choices are available, best food, at least my recommendations of the best food. Today we're talking about some our Prime Minister's so-called nation-building projects, getting more into political commentary because in my view, many years ago, the political commentary and social commentary that I would see in the media was a lot higher quality, extremely good, as a matter of fact. But nowadays it seems that we have a political elite which is allowed to run amok while things get worse and Canadians suffer. So today we're talking about wanted to get your thoughts and views on sort of my perspective on Mark Carney's nation-building projects. In my view, there are basically at least a couple of important criteria for a nation-building project. The first criteria, in my view, when you start talking about nation-building is that the project should be focused on people and not just simply some infrastructure which benefits special interests. In my view, that does not, what Mark Carney is proposing does not satisfy that. Also, vital to a nation-building project is that it needs to capture the national imagination. It needs to discernibly be designed to bring people together. And I don't see that in the so-called nation-building projects that Mr. Carney, our Prime Minister, has proposed that he wants a quick and fast track of them. Indeed, arguably the first nation-building project for Canada ever was the building of the transcontinental railway that was envisioned by then Prime Minister Sir John A. Macdonald. That was vital to Canada coming together from sea to sea. That, in my view, is what a nation-building project is about, a project which, like the transcontinental railway, which brings Canada together, national in scope, designed to bring communities together, and then infrastructure is pretty much a secondary facet of that. So in my view, Mr. Carney's projects does not satisfy that basic axiom, that their basic tests. And then I'll go into, wanted to get your comments on my views on what Mr. Carney, the type of projects that Mr. Carney could be focusing on, that he's not. His desired nation-building project is, number one, the phase 2 of the LNG Canadian Kitmat BC, sort of a doubling the production of liquefied natural gas. The Darlington nuclear project in Carlington, Ontario, which will make small nuclear reactors. That's 2. The Contrecoeur terminal container project to expand the Montreal, I think it's Port of Montreal. That's number 3. He also wanted to focus on number 4, the McIvena Bay Foran Copper Mine Project in Saskatchewan as number 4, and number 5, finally, the expansion of a mine in northwestern British Columbia. Now, these are some projects that are scattered. One in Montreal, Carlington, another one in BC. Saskatchewan, actually 2 in BC. In my view, these at all are not what I would call nation-building projects. They're an opportunity to support certain construction and mining interests that serve the special interests of the people, of the various corporate interests and equity funds and shareholders that want to get a profit from those projects at the expense of the Canadian taxpayer. And I'm quite shocked by the so-called nation-building projects proposed by Mr. Carney. I'd be curious in finding out whether there's any kind of link to these projects, to any of Mr. Carney's endeavors before he was Prime Minister. Notwithstanding that, here are my what I would call the types of projects that Mr. Carney should have been focusing on, which he's not focusing on. These are what I call my top choices of alternative nation-building projects. Number one, as a nation-building project, I would propose to Canadians watching this a high-speed bullet rail network. That should be, in my view, right on top there. Again, this has been, talked about. There's some proposal that talked about the Montreal, Ottawa, Quebec City rail link line. I'm surprised that this is not a part of his listing of nation-building projects. I envision a nation-building project linking Windsor, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, Quebec City, and Halifax, and a second leg linking Winnipeg, Regina, Edmonton, and Calgary. That's what I would propose as a important type of nation-building project, which basically, recommemorates, so to speak, the first nation-building project of Canada, which is the Transcontinental Railway. I would also, as number two, envision as a nation-building project the need for the Prime Minister to start paying attention to the development of hospital facilities, boosting hospital infrastructure in order to relieve the congestion that is taking place with respect to universal public health care that people are experiencing. In my view, there needs to be a focus on hospitals because more and more Canadians are suffering long lines with emergency room congested facilities, and in my view, again, this a focus on hospital infrastructure as well as the need for more doctors and training for doctors so that more Canadians can have access to medical support. That, in my view, would qualify as a nation-building project because it's focused on people and communities and the health of our citizens and not simply special interests that Mr. Carney is focusing on. So that would be my number two, would be a hospital infrastructure. Number three, I envision a fund that Mr. Carney has talked about housing before and the need for improved housing infrastructure. I would focus on three, a transfer payments to the provinces in order to boost cooperative housing across Canada. In my view, there are some great housing co-ops scattered around Ontario and perhaps in different parts of the country. Housing cooperatives are great for reducing rent and providing a sense of community. We had some housing cooperatives, I believe, went up in the 80s, but because of mismanagement and corruption, the housing there's not been a lot of development in terms of housing cooperatives since the early 80s and other small experiments. In my view, housing cooperatives are a key to reducing rent for many Canadians and providing an alternative to the very expensive housing that people are not finding, which is rendering a lot of people homeless. So I think there needs to be, Mr. Carney, if he's actually committed to housing, should have addressed that as part of nation building and not focused on all these fast track stuff he wants to fast track, which in my view is not nation building at all. Much of these projects are just going to undermine and subvert the environment, and he wants to fast track them for special interests and label them as nation building. So that's number three. Number four, I would also focus on the need for national territorial defense. This is, in my view, important in terms of the whole talk about Mr. Trump south of the border, wanting to annex us. I think that if we focus on a national territorial defense, the recruitment of a new national territorial defense force where we encourage Canadians to volunteer to support the defense of Canada itself, and to have this not just as a military defense force, but also a peace corps that would focus on environmental protection and other peace related constructive areas of supporting our quality of life of communities and the environment. I think such a national territorial defense would also support the need for, it will also complement nation building. Indeed, there was indeed a military component to Canada's expansion and its own nation building, which also included the RCMP. And I think that once we have a situation where we're being threatened in terms of our sovereignty, it is vital for us. We owe it to all the people who sacrificed in order to affirm the sovereignty of Canada. We owe it to the veterans of successive wars that fought for the sovereignty of Canada to have a national territorial defense in the face of threats to our sovereignty as part of nation building, as well as supporting those veterans who sacrificed themselves and are dealing with various potential health and housing issues. Another facet, which in my view is neglected in nation building, that in my view is important in order to alleviate various alienation, particularly in Western Canada with an emphasis in Alberta, is that a national pipeline project that is in my view should have been part of the nation building efforts that Mr. Carney identified. So a national pipeline project which is painstakingly careful about making sure that it does not sacrifice the environment at all in terms of it needs to be done right. In my view, I would propose a community-owned national pipeline. I believe the government has indicated that it's waiting for some private interest. I don't think that we should be a privately run necessarily. I think it can be, if we look at the pipeline as bringing together a variety of investors, including community investors, into the pipeline. I believe with the will and the support of such a pipeline, there'd be more than enough money to support a national transcontinental pipeline. I don't think we should be waiting on one particular company to come around to invest in the pipeline. And I think that such an effort of a community-owned pipeline would definitely complement nation building. My proposal for a nation building effort is also the improvements to the Trans-Canada Highway system. Some parts of the Trans-Canada are divided and quite well, while others are suffering and are not so well maintained. I think that the government should be focusing on improving the Trans-Canada Highway system from coast to coast to ensure that it's safe at all areas, that it is accessible and supports the efficient movement of traffic, including people and transport trucks that use the Trans-Canada Highway to deliver goods and services or for holiday excursions and various other uses. I think the Trans-Canada Highway system, which is a very important part of the linking of Canada together, that should be a part of that would be a credible part of any nation building endeavors by the federal government. I would also endeavor to say that a focus on sort of a federal support to a organized environmental stewardship between the federal government and the indigenous communities that would focus on a specialized environmental task force to monitor and improve and safeguard the quality of living of all Canadians, and with an also inclusive emphasis on the indigenous communities. A environmental stewardship that looks to ensure that indigenous communities have access to clean water, access to safe and housing, as well as making sure that our drinking water is maintained to be clean and we don't have drinking water polluted like the United States. I think that that would be a very important, critical part of a nation building effort. I would also subscribe that there could also be an emphasis on Canadians have expressed concern about having being dependency on new military jets coming from the States. I think that we need to emphasize our independence at all levels, our sovereignty at all levels. That includes building up our infrastructure to make our own airplanes, and that would, in the spirit of the Avro Arrow, I think if we rekindled the Avro Arrow, which attracted a lot of know-how, a lot of talent in Canada. That because when the Avro Arrow back in the under Diefenbaker was canceled, a lot of that brain drain went to the States. I think if we renewed it, that would also contribute to nation building by re-attracting that talent, by re-attracting an emphasis on scientific technology. It's a approach that we could perhaps contemplate, with the various European partners like the British, Royal Air Force or other partners that wanted to order planes from such an initiative. I think that rekindling the Avro Arrow would definitely recapture the Canadian imagination. A lot of people are, there's been a lingering, there's been a lingering national sadness over what could have happened and what could have been if they had the Arrow. I think that rekindling that Arrow would definitely excite and capture public imagination, unlike all these other projects that Mr. Carney has inappropriately labeled to be nation building. So I think that would be important. I think that in light of the threats to our automobile industry posed by Donald Trump, I think if we began to emphasize developing our own car industry, I don't mean one which is reliant on the United States, a branch plant of the United States. I think that we have the capacity to develop our own cars. If South Korea can develop its own cars, if Sweden can have its own cars, and we have a larger population than Sweden, and why can't Canada start making its own cars? Why can't we have our own cars and not be dependent on Donald Trump and the vagaries of Donald Trump? So I think that, and there's been, in fact, I've seen projects. One designer's already had a prototype for a Canadian electric car. So I think that if we focused on our own car industry and developing our own automobile industry and not be dependent on the United States, whether it's pipelines, whether it's military jets, whether it's cars, these would support nation building. We need to start focusing on people, communities, the quality of living in our communities, the essential things which we identify as Canadians, healthcare, hospitals that are vital to the delivery of healthcare services. We need to focus on housing, which has been sadly neglected by liberal governments that have recently focused on immigration without a concern about housing infrastructure of and has led to homelessness. So I think that we need to focus on housing and all these other facets which I spoke to, which in my view would be a lot better than the so-called nation building efforts of Mark Carney. I invite you to make your comments below on whether you in fact think that Mark Carney is on the right track with respect to his 5 sought nation building plans, or whether you think that any of these proposals which I've made with respect to nation building are better or as good, or whether you support some and not the others. We look forward to you making your comments below, and if you like what is being said at this particular episode on nation building in Canada and Mr. Carney's approaches. I look forward to you liking and subscribing to this channel, and we'll have more similar commentary in the future, hopefully. So thank you very much, and like and subscribe, and thanks for watching this edition of the Ottawa Market that we talked about a critique on Mark Carney's so-called nation building plans.